So a few years ago I had this idea for a story called Superman of La Mancha, and it's about a guy who thinks he's a superhero, and he does all of these things, has these adventures, and he thinks that he's righting wrongs, but he may not be, and he thinks that he's trying to make the world a better place, but he may just be listening to the wrong voices. The idea of Superman of La Mancha was based in part on Don Quixote, but it was only based on my perceptions of what Don Quixote was without actually having experienced any of it. I had not seen any adaptations, I had not read the novel. All I knew was like windmills and the impossible dream and really nothing else. So I did what anyone should do in that situation. I did research. I watched, first of all, Man of La Mancha with Peter O'Toole, which is a filmed version of a stage adaptation musical of Don Quixote's story. It's very, very, very good, very moving. I recently got to see a stage adaptation, or a stage production, here locally, and it was really, really good. It made me cry several times in the theater, sitting next to my sister, and that was a little bit awkward, but it's just so good. You can't not. Of course, if you're going to adapt great literature or reference great literature, watching a movie's not enough. So eventually I had to read the novel, and I did that. I read Don Quixote earlier this year, I guess, and I really enjoy it and don't all at the same time, because it's very, very wordy. Like, you'll get passages where instead of saying Don Quixote rode off valiantly, he says Don Quixote rode off valiantly, like this other guy who rode off valiantly this one time when he did these other things, and that other guy who rode off valiantly, and remember that one guy who like slayed a dragon and did all this other wonderful, amazing stuff? It was just like that. That sort of valiance is what the valiance that Don Quixote had when he rode off valiantly. That's too much, Cervantes. Like, we don't need all of that. We just need he rode off valiantly. And I've never really understood when people, like, griped about description. Like, my opinion always has been, like, those are wonderful words. Don't get rid of those. Why would you? Any word that we get from John Steinbeck is amazing. Just keep it all. Why would you want him to just hurry up and do something, say something, when he's describing things and you get all these wonderful words from John Steinbeck? But in Cervantes' case, I totally understand. It gets old. The other thing that was a little bit jarring for me, reading the first part especially, is that it's like the 16th century version of a Kevin Smith movie. There's like dick and fart jokes everywhere. Like, it gets really crass, and it seems like that's the only point of some of the exploration, some of their sallies, is just to make obscene jokes. I kept expecting this core of humanity and hope, and it's sort of there, but it's obscured by other things. And by the time I got to the end of the first part, I was a little bit disillusioned with the whole thing. That changed pretty quickly with the second part, though, because it's postmodern. It's the characters interacting as part of the audience of the first book. Like, basically none of the events of the second half would occur without their knowledge of the first half. It's so amazing and strange, and to think that this was hundreds of years ago that Cervantes was doing this, it's just mind-blowing to me. All the same, there's still a lot of ridiculous, overwrought, repetitive nonsense that you have to wade through, and there are brilliant flashes of poetic description of just the human condition, especially from Sancho Panza, but it's not always there at the end of the chapter. It's not always there at the end of the sally. It's not always in every adventure do you get these shining moments of clarity and literary value. A lot of it is just a description of stuff that you kind of chuckle about and you don't really maybe care that much about at the end. Far be it from me to say that Cervantes didn't know what he was doing. He was kind of the first doing what he was doing. But I prefer Man of La Mancha, the film adaptation, way more. Partially because the music is so good, but partially because the story that it tells is very different. There is a Dulcinea in Man of La Mancha. There is no Dulcinea that you ever witness in Don Quixote the novel. You don't get to see the impact of his insanity as clearly in a positive light. It's balanced in the novel by positivity and negativity, and his insanity is much more severe in the novel. But ultimately what makes Man of La Mancha such an amazing adaptation is that it doesn't add anything. There might be situations, there might be characters such as Dulcinea that are mentioned in Don Quixote but don't actually exist. But there's nothing in the adaptation that is not there in the novel, like textually, like in the nature of the novel. And so you end up getting a movie that is way more about the resilience of the human spirit and way more about hope and fearlessness and the impossible dream. You get something that's way more uplifting, that's way more moving, but it's not invented for the movie. It's there in the novel. It's just been diluted by dick and fart jokes in the novel. There's a lot of other stuff going on. There is, like I said, that postmodernism. There is so much strange, beautiful, amazing stuff in Don Quixote that is not adapted into Man of La Mancha. What Man of La Mancha does so well is taking just what you can handle, just what you can make sense of in a movie, and then making a movie out of it. And that, to me, is why Man of La Mancha might be the best adaptation of anything ever. And I really think that you should watch it. You should also read Don Quixote. It may take you a while. You may not enjoy every minute of it, but it's an experience, and if nothing else, you can say, I've read what's regarded to be one of the best novels ever written, so that's cool. And yeah, you should do those things, and I will see you later.